My parents abandoned my Alzheimer's grandmother at the airport to sell her farm. I drove her home, opened the kitchen table drawer, and found the listing agreement dated 3 weeks earlier. The thing I keep coming back to, even now, even after the courtroom, even after everything, is the watch. Not the boarding pass, not the empty chairs, not even the security footage, though that's what broke the gallery open and made the judge go very, very still. The watch. 30 seconds of airport security footage. My father crouching down in front of my grandmother, taking her hands in his the way you take the hands of someone you're comforting, standing, turning, walking away with my mother through the terminal crowd, and then, halfway across that lounge, with his 81-year-old mother sitting alone in a plastic chair behind him, he lifted his wrist and checked his watch. Not fleeing, not overwhelmed, not a man undone by an impossible situation. On schedule. I didn't turn around when the gallery gasped. I didn't need to. I'd already seen it 3 times in my attorney's office, and each time I'd felt the same thing. Not rage, exactly. Something older and quieter. The feeling of understanding something you'd been circling for years and finally have the coordinates for. That's the moment I want you to hold on to. We'll get there. But first, you need to understand what kind of woman was sitting in that chair. My grandmother's name is Eleanor Ruth Granger. She is 81 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and she makes the best pie crust in 3 counties. Lard-based, hand-worked, never overhandled, a technique she learned from her own mother on that farm in 1962 and has executed without variation for 60 years. She raised 4 children on a 160 acres of Kansas prairie. She kept the farm solvent through 2 droughts and 1 catastrophic equipment loan, and the death of her husband Walter in 2018. She has Alzheimer's moderate stage, diagnosed 14 months before this story begins. She forgets faces sometimes. She forgets years. She loses the thread of a conversation mid-sentence and looks briefly puzzled, like a person who has set something down and can't quite remember where. But she knows the farm. She knows every hook and window and floorboard creak of that farmhouse. She knows Walter's photograph on the mantle. She knows the smell of the soil in October. And she knew at some level I am still not able to fully articulate that she could trust me. I am Claire Granger. I'm 34. I've been a geriatric nurse for 9 years. The last 5 in a dedicated memory care unit at St. Joseph's Medical Center in Wichita, where I work under Dr. Marcus Webb, the unit's director, who has 22 years in geriatric neurology, and the particular patience of someone who has made peace with a disease that moves at its own pace and answers to no one. I've held dying hands. I've signed death certificates at 3 a.m. without flinching. I know what this disease takes and what it leaves behind, and I have held the hands of families on the day it takes the last thing. I know what abandonment looks like in a dementia patient. I had just never expected to see it in an airport terminal, orchestrated by my own father. The trip was framed as a reconciliation. That's the word my mother used when she called me 6 weeks before. Reconciliation. Like we were 2 countries that had been at war, and someone had finally negotiated a ceasefire. The truth was simpler and more ordinary. My parents and I had been estranged for 16 months over the question of my grandmother's care. They wanted her in a facility. I wanted her at the farm, with consistent in-home care and the familiar environment that research and 9 years of clinical experience told me was the single most stabilizing thing for a moderate-stage Alzheimer's patient. We'd said things. They'd said things back. I'd stopped going to Sunday dinners. My mother had stopped texting first. Then, out of nowhere, the call. We want to do this right, Claire. We want to take a family trip. Show mom a good time while she still can. And then we can all sit down together and figure out the next steps for her care as a family. My mother has a specific voice she uses for things she has already decided. I recognized it on the call. I told myself the edge I heard was my own wariness, my own scar tissue from 16 months of conflict. I told myself that people could change their minds, that my parents genuinely loved my grandmother even if we disagreed on what love required of them. I told myself a lot of things. I booked a flight to Kansas City. I drove to the farm, picked up my grandmother, who was having a good week, bright and oriented, wearing her good blue cardigan, and we drove together to meet my parents at KCI for what everyone agreed was a long overdue family trip to Phoenix. The first thing I noticed was the bags. My parents had 2 large checked suitcases each. That's not unusual for a 2-week trip, but my mother had a carry-on that was packed to the legal limit, the kind of packing that happens when you're uncertain about checked bag access. And my father had his leather portfolio, the one he uses for real estate business, tucked under his arm in the check-in line. Vacation, I told myself. People overpack for vacation. The second thing I noticed was my grandmother's boarding pass. She handed it to me at the gate, the way she hands me things she's been asked to hold and isn't sure about. I looked at it once, confirmed her seat number, handed it back. I was tired from the drive. I didn't read it closely. I didn't see until later that it was one way. No return flight. Purchased 11 days ago. We were in the main terminal lounge 40 minutes before boarding. My grandmother was at the window with her purse in her lap watching the planes. She likes planes. They make her happy in a straightforward, uncomplicated way, which is one of the gifts this disease sometimes gives back before it takes more. My father had his hand on her shoulder. He was saying something to her, and she was nodding. My mother touched my arm. Honey, they need you at the customer service desk. Something about your seat assignment. I didn't question it. I started toward the desk, and then I remembered I had a call I needed to make, a quick one, about a patient case back in Wichita. I stopped, 20 feet from where my grandmother was sitting, and called the unit, which is when I happened to have the number for Desert Pines Memory Care, the facility in the brochure my mother had left on her kitchen counter 3 weeks earlier, the one I'd photographed with my phone because something about the timing felt strange already in my recent calls. I don't know why I called it. Instinct? Professional habit? The specific alert alertness of someone who works in a field where details matter and inattention costs people something they can't get back. The phone rang twice. Desert Pines Memory Care, how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to confirm an admission for a family member, Eleanor Granger. She'd be arriving, I believe today or this week. A pause. Keyboard sounds. I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see any Granger in our system. No admission scheduled, no intake paperwork, no reservation. Nothing. The terminal noise went strange around me. Distant. Could you check again? Eleanor Ruth Granger. Granger. I've checked twice. I'm sorry. We have no record of anyone by that name. I hung up. I turned around. My parents' chairs were empty. Their bags were gone. My grandmother sat alone by the window, purse in her lap, boarding pass in her hand, looking at the planes. Gone. I stood there for 1 full second, which is longer than it sounds when the world has just rearranged itself into something unrecognizable, and then I moved. I covered the distance to my grandmother in about 4 steps. Grandma, she looked up. Her face opened into the uncomplicated pleasure it always does when she sees me. Claire, sweetheart, your father went to get something. He'll be right back. My throat did something complicated. Did he say where? Oh, she gestured vaguely toward the terminal. He'll be right back. I took her hand. I looked at the boarding pass still folded in her fingers. Phoenix Sky Harbor. One way, no return. Purchased September 14th. Today was September 25th. The reservation had been made 11 days ago, while my mother was calling me about reconciliation, while she was using the word family on the phone with a voice that sounded almost genuine. I photographed the boarding pass front and back with my phone. 10:47 a.m. Then I did what 9 years of nursing has trained me to do when everything goes wrong simultaneously. I opened the Notes app and I started writing down the time. 10:47 a.m. Confirmed boarding pass is one way. Purchased September 14. 10:43 a.m. Desert Pines confirmed no admission record for Eleanor Granger. 10:38 a.m. Last visual confirmation of both parents in lounge. I photographed the 2 empty chairs, the abandoned coffee cups, still warm, still steaming slightly, evidence of a departure so recent it hadn't had time to cool. Then I called my father. 2 rings. Voicemail. He saw my name and pressed decline. I texted my mother. Where are you? I know about Desert Pines. Where are you right now? She responded in under 60 seconds. Don't make this dramatic. We've earned a rest. She's in good hands with you. I read that text 3 times. We've earned a rest. 34 years. And that's what my grandmother was to them, in the end. Something they'd earned a rest from. I took a screenshot of the exchange. 10:51 a.m. Then I looked at my grandmother, who was still watching the planes with the same open, unclouded pleasure, and I made a decision so fast it didn't feel like a decision. Grandma, change of plans. We're going to the farm. She looked at me. Something in her face settled, the specific settling of someone who has been vaguely uncertain and has just been handed something solid to stand on. All right, sweetheart, she said. Let me get my purse. Her purse was already in her lap. I found us a new flight home and drove her back to the farm in my rental car. She walked in through the front door, hung her purse on the hook she'd used for 50 years, the brass hook by the door, slightly loose, that Walter had always meant to fix, and said, I'll start the coffee like she'd never left. I stood in the doorway with my hand on the frame and breathed, just breathed. Then I started clearing the mail from the kitchen table. It was stacked the way mail stacks when someone has been managing a property from a distance. Insurance notices, utility statements, a seed catalog she'd have no use for anymore. I moved it to the counter in a stack. Underneath it, a manila folder. Prairie Line Realty letterhead. I opened it. Market analysis, 160 acres. The full property. Comparable sales, price per acre, estimated listing range of $1.1 to $1.4 million. A draft listing agreement, seller line, Robert A. Granger, my father's name. Dated September 3rd, 3 weeks before the airport, 3 weeks before the phone call about reconciliation, before the word family used like a peace offering, before just sit here, we'll come right back. 3 weeks before all of it, my father had walked a real estate agent across his mother's land and had her priced for sale. My hands were steady when I photographed every page. I don't know why I expected them not to be. Steadiness is what nursing teaches you. Not the absence of feeling, but the deferral of it. The body's agreement to hold the feeling somewhere safe until the work is done. I called my Uncle Wes that evening. He's my father's younger brother, a man I'd always thought of as basically decent, blunt in the way of people who believe they're being honest when they're actually being convenient. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. Look, Claire, the farm has to sell this quarter. The numbers it has to happen. We just need her looked at by a doctor first. Declared, incompetent. Then it's clean. Then the sale goes through without any complications. What? I'm going to stop you there. I hung up. Then I sat at my grandmother's kitchen table. In the house her hands had shaped for 60 years, and I called Rebecca Holt. Rebecca Holt is a family and elder law attorney in Wichita with 26 years of practice. She is a small woman with reading glasses she keeps on a beaded chain, and the particular focus of someone who has spent decades watching families do terrible things to their most vulnerable members and has developed zero tolerance for it. My colleague at St. Joseph's had referred her to me 8 months earlier when the disagreements with my parents first became serious, and I'd had one consultation with her then, enough to know that if this ever became a legal matter, she was the right person in the room. She answered on the second ring. I told her everything. She was quiet through most of it, asking 2 or 3 precise questions, and when I finished, she said, Claire, don't touch anything else in that house tonight. I'm sending you a secure email in the next 20 minutes. I need you to catalog and photograph everything in that folder, every piece of correspondence, everything with a date on it. Can you do that? I already had. She was quiet for a moment. Good, she said. You're already thinking like this is what it is. What is it? It's a guardianship case, and depending on how a few things land, it may be more than that. She meant criminal abandonment. I knew it before she said it. I'd known it since the empty chairs and the still warm coffee cups. I'd known it in the specific way you know things you don't want to know, in the body first, then in language. My parents filed their guardianship petition 12 days later. I should have expected it. Rebecca had warned me that the first mover advantage in these cases is real, that people who know they've done something wrong often try to get in front of it institutionally before someone else can frame it. She'd said, they may file before you do. Be ready. I was ready. Their petition called me unstable, isolated, volatile. It said I had removed a vulnerable woman from her loving family without consent. It used language like emotional manipulation and controlling behavior. It described my grandmother as a woman in need of professional memory care, which was true, and described me as unequipped to provide it, which was a lie constructed from the bones of a true thing. The people who had purchased a one-way ticket were petitioning a court to protect my grandmother from me. I sat in Rebecca's office and read the petition and felt a cold, clarifying fury. Not the hot kind, not the kind that makes you say things you regret, the cold kind, the kind that turns into precision. Rebecca gave me 24 hours to respond, then asked for 36 more to gather documentation. I stayed at the farm with my grandmother, who was having a good week, who made pie on Tuesday and identified every photograph on the mantle with perfect accuracy, who sat with me on the porch in the early morning and said, I like it when you stay. Claire, in a voice so straightforward and undemanding it put something in my chest I had to keep very still. Our response was a binder, tabbed and indexed. Tab A, the listing agreement dated September 3rd, with my father's name in the seller line. Tab B, the boarding pass, one-way, purchased September 14th. Tab C, airline records confirming purchase date and the absence of any return reservation. Tab D, the call log to Desert Pines Memory Care, with a written statement from the facility confirming no admission had ever been scheduled. Tab E, my mother's text, don't make this dramatic. We've earned a rest. Tab F, the phone recording of my Uncle Wes. We just need her declared, then it's clean. Tab G, my own time-stamped notes and photographs from the airport, the empty chairs, the boarding pass. Rebecca had also subpoenaed the airport security footage. 30 seconds, camera 14, gate C concourse. My father crouching to take my grandmother's hands, standing, walking away, and halfway across the lounge, the watch. The hearing was on a Thursday morning in November. Courtroom of the Honorable Sandra Peterson, Sedgwick County District Court. Judge Peterson has 18 years on the bench and a reputation in the family law community for extreme patience with everyone in her courtroom and zero patience for anyone who wastes it. My grandmother sat beside me. She was wearing the blue cardigan. She had her purse in her lap. Occasionally she hummed a hymn, something slow, something she'd known so long it lived below the level of memory that the disease could reach. Rebecca Holt presented our evidence in order, tab by tab, with the economy of someone who knows the facts are sufficient and doesn't need theater. The listing agreement landed hard. I could see it in the posture of the gallery. The one-way boarding pass landed harder. My mother's text, read aloud in the acoustics of a courtroom, don't make this dramatic, we've earned a rest, produced a sound from someone in the gallery that wasn't quite a gasp and wasn't quite something else. The Uncle Wes recording, we just need her declared, then it's clean. My father's attorney objected. Judge Peterson overruled in a single word, then the footage. Rebecca asked the clerk to play it twice. Both times the courtroom watched my father take his mother's hands. Both times they watched him walk away. Both times they watched the watch check. That half-second glance at his wrist that contained in 30 frames of airport security footage the entire truth of what kind of act this had been. Deliberate, planned, timed. The gallery didn't gasp the first time. They gasped the second. My father came out of his chair. He was shouting, something about manipulation, about how I'd always turned the family against him, about how this was his mother and none of this was what it looked like. My mother was weeping in a way that filled the room. And then my Uncle Wes, panicking in a way that overrode every instinct for self-preservation he might have had, stood up and said, loudly, in a room where a judge was already watching him, the bank won't wait, Robert. We've told them this quarter. We needed her declared. We're out of time. Out loud, in his own voice, in front of Judge Sandra Peterson, who has 18 years on the bench and zero patience for wasted time. The room went very quiet. My grandmother looked up from her lap at the sound of the shouting and then looked at me. I took her hand. She looked back down and resumed humming. Judge Peterson let the silence hold for a moment, the way a judge lets silence hold when she wants everyone in the room to understand that what just happened is now part of the record. Then she spoke. She denied their petition. She appointed me emergency guardian of Eleanor Ruth Ranger, with a full hearing for permanent guardianship to be scheduled within 60 days. She ordered the airport security footage forwarded to the county attorney's office to review for criminal abandonment charges under Kansas Statute 215417, abuse of an elder person, which carries a sentence of up to 2 years. Then she looked at my father, directly. The way a judge looks at someone when she wants to be certain he understands that what she is about to say is the last word on the matter, at least in her courtroom. She said he was unfit. One word. My father had no more to say. The criminal review was opened 4 weeks later. As of the filing of this account, it remains under investigation by the county attorney's office. I am not able to comment further on that, on the advice of Rebecca Holt, who is also quietly excellent. The farm is not for sale. I moved in with my grandmother for the winter, temporarily, then less temporarily. I took a leave from St. Joseph's. Dr. Webb, who had already read the situation accurately from 200 miles away, told me to take what I needed and that my position would be there when I came back. That is the kind of person he is. I set up a proper home care arrangement. A part-time aide named Ruth Ann, who comes 3 mornings a week and has the specific quality of calm that my grandmother's nervous system recognizes as safe. Meal delivery, medication management, The occupational therapist who assessed the farmhouse and told me the layout was, genuinely, ideal for a patient at this stage. Familiar, single level, low stimulation, meaningful. I told her I knew. My grandmother made pie for Ruth Ann on her second visit. Lard crust, hand-worked, never overhandled. Ruth Ann ate 2 slices and said it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. My grandmother looked pleased in the uncomplicated way she looks pleased about things she's certain of. Some nights I sit on the porch after she's asleep and I think about the watch, about what it means, not just legally, not just in terms of evidence, but in terms of what it reveals about what my grandmother was to my father in the end. Not a person, a task. Something to be moved off the list on schedule efficiently without sentiment. He didn't know I was behind him. He didn't know I'd turned around. He didn't know about the call to Desert Pines, or the boarding pass, or the green notebook I now keep with every date and detail of what happened and what came after. He just checked his watch. And the thing about that, the thing I've had to sit with in the months since, is that it told the truth more completely than anything he ever said. My grandmother is safe. That's the whole sentence. That's the ending. My grandmother is safe, and she's in the only place her brain still trusts. And this morning she woke up and walked to the kitchen and said, "I'll start the coffee," and put her hand on the same percolator she's used for 30 years. And for a moment she was just a woman in her own kitchen. Not a problem to be solved, not an obstacle to assail, not a task on someone else's schedule, just Eleanor, just home.